I never planned on crawling back behind a greasy counter, not after everything I'd written. Fast food filth. That was my tiny rebellion. Cheap camera rigs, late-night posts about mystery meat and health code violations, a few grainy exposés that got just enough clicks to piss off the right people. Or the wrong ones, depending on which side of the fryer you were standing on. In the end, my landlord's knock was louder than any comment section. He taped the eviction notice to my door like it was a prize ribbon. I spent 3 hours staring at it, listening to the fridge hum in my empty kitchen, trying to remember the last time I'd eaten something I didn't photograph first. This Chick-Fil-A on the edge of town was the only place that'd hire me. The sign in the window was faded, the logo peeling off in strips like sunburned skin. I stepped inside, half out of spite, half because I had $6 left in my checking account. Taryn was the manager, my trainer, he called himself. He looked like he'd been stapled together out of old bread and lukewarm sweet tea. His uniform polo clung to him like plastic wrap, sweat rings blooming under his arms. He didn't ask about my last job. He didn't flinch when I lied about my references. He just gave me a plastic bag with a wrinkled uniform inside and told me I'd be working a special overnight. Just one night, he promised, if I could follow the rules. I waited for a real manual, a laminated binder, a checklist about hairnets and food temps, and how to smile when your feet felt like hamburger. Instead, he pulled a sheet of receipt paper from his pocket. The corners were soaked with grease. Ketchup stains smeared the middle where the words were scrawled in thick black Sharpie, letters so warped they bled through. I wiped my thumb across the top line, but the ink just smeared more. 7 lines, no corporate logo, no cute cows doodled in the margin, just 7 rules that looked like they'd been written by someone with oil under their fingernails. Taryn's eyes flicked over my shoulder like he was checking for someone else listening. Then he pushed the sheet closer to me. "Read 'em twice," he said. "Follow 'em to the letter. Don't improvise. Don't get clever. Just survive." When I asked what happened if I didn't, he smiled, but it didn't touch anything behind his eyes. He turned away and left me there alone at the front counter with the hum of the soda machine dripping syrup like it was bleeding. I held that greasy sheet in both hands and read every line until the letters blurred. 1. If a man comes in asking for a frosted lemonade but pays in coins made of bone, don't take them. Give him a cup of tap water and look away while he drinks. 2. If a child orders waffle fries but asks for them raw, you must fry them twice, never once, never 3 times. 3. If a woman in a red coat demands a grilled chicken sandwich with extra skin, wrap it in foil but hide it under the counter. If you hand it over, you'll feel her teeth next. 4. If twins come to the drive-thru in a car with no wheels, they will whisper, 6 nuggets. Only give them 5. Keep the 6th in your pocket until dawn. 5. If a man with no face appears at the counter and says, "Chicken minis," give him honey instead and pray. 6. If someone slides a note under the back door that just says, "Milkshake," do not open the door. Pour a shake into the sink instead. Listen until the slurping stops. 7. The last rule. If the cow ever asks for your order, don't answer. Never speak. Never look it in the eyes. Never tell it what you crave. I felt greasy syrup drip onto my sneaker from the soda machine behind me. Each drop hitting the floor like a tiny clock counting down the seconds I hadn't even spent yet. 11:59 p.m. I scrawled my name on the paper time card pinned to the corkboard in the back hallway. The names above mine were crossed out with lines so deep they tore through the paper. Taryn's office door was closed now. No light under the crack. Just me and the humming fryers that hadn't kicked on yet. I read the first rule again and told myself it was a joke. Some weird local prank on the new girl who thought she could slip in and slip out without paying the price for her old blog. Then the doorbell chimed behind me. I knew better than to laugh this time. The doorbell chimed so softly that for a second I thought I'd imagined it. But the sound didn't stop echoing in my head even when I turned around. The lobby lights hummed overhead, buzzing the way cheap bulbs do when they're trying to stay alive. He stood just inside the doorway, half shadowed under the dusty cow mural that hung above the order board. Tall. Taller than the frame should have allowed, shoulders hunched like he was trying not to scrape the ceiling tiles. His skin looked like damp printer paper, thin enough to show something moving under it when he shifted his weight from one broken shoe to the other. He didn't look at me. Or maybe he did. I couldn't tell if he even had eyes behind that soft gray skin that sagged around the edges like wet tissue. He shuffled forward, the sound of his shoes dragging over the sticky floor louder than the soda machine behind me. When he reached the counter, he didn't speak at first. He lifted one hand, more bone than anything else under skin that didn't seem interested in holding together, and dropped 3 round things onto the laminate. They clinked when they hit. Not the dull clatter of loose change, but a sharp, crisp click, like teeth knocking together in a dry jaw. I glanced down before my brain could stop me. 3 round discs, off-white, tiny grooves spiraling through them like marrow cracks. Coins made of bone, just like the first rule said. He rasped a word that felt too heavy for the air between us. Frosted lemonade. Every part of me wanted to run, but the door behind him stayed shut, no matter how many times I blinked at it. My phone was in my back pocket. I could almost feel the cold rectangle of dead plastic pressing against my spine, reminding me how useless it was. So I did what the rules said. I forced my feet to slide backward, never turning my back to him. I grabbed a paper cup from the stack under the counter. My hands were shaking so bad they rattled the rest of the cups. One dropped to the floor and rolled under the fryer. I didn't bother to pick it up. The soda machine hissed when I got too close. A sticky hiss, syrup dripping down the metal like it was sweating. I didn't touch it. I sidestepped to the back sink instead, shoved the cup under the tap. Cold water. Tap only. No ice, no syrup, no lemon. Just enough to fill the paper to the line where the logo faded. When I turned back, he hadn't moved. He just stood there, bone coins lined up in front of him, like a little row of teeth, waiting to bite me if I made one wrong move. I set the cup on the counter. My fingers brushed the edge of the nearest coin, and I swear it felt warm. I yanked my hand back before I could even think about what that meant. I kept my eyes down, staring at the wet ring where the cup had dripped. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just listened. The sound he made when he drank wasn't a slurp. It was something thicker, deeper, like hearing a sink drain pull down something it shouldn't. The cup rattled once against the counter. I pressed my nails into my palm to keep from flinching. When the sound stopped, the air felt colder, like someone had cracked a window in the middle of winter. I risked a glance. He was gone. The door hadn't opened. The coins were gone too. All that was left was a wet ring on the counter, stained faintly yellow around the edges like old soup. I wiped it away with the hem of my apron, but it smeared more than it cleaned. I threw the rag under the sink and checked the door. Still locked, latch solid. I tapped my phone's screen. No bars, no signal, no help. The fryer behind me hissed like it was laughing at me. I turned back to the counter, pulled the crumpled rules sheet from my pocket. My thumb traced the next line, the Sharpie smudge damp with sweat. 2. If a child orders waffle fries but asks for them raw, you must fry them twice. Never once, never 3 times. I squeezed my eyes shut, told myself the man with the bone coins had been a fluke, a joke, a hallucination brought on by bad coffee and worse life choices. Then the bell above the door chimed again, a softer sound this time, like tiny shoes tapping tile. When I opened my eyes, she was already standing at the counter. A girl, no older than 7, in a sundress that might have been white once, but now looked the color of fryer grease. Her hair hung in limp clumps that dripped onto the floor. Her eyes were black, all pupil, no light. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. She just opened her mouth and whispered words that made my stomach twist into a knot that wouldn't come undone. Raw waffle fries. For a second, I just stared at her. I don't know why I thought she might take it back, like she'd giggle and say she was kidding. But she didn't blink, didn't shift her weight, didn't do anything except drip. Her shoes looked too big for her feet, cheap plastic sandals soaked dark with whatever was trailing off her dress. I remembered the rule. Not once, not 3 times, twice. That was it. My throat felt too tight to swallow, but my feet started moving on their own. I stepped around the counter, careful not to look too long at her eyes. They reminded me of the fryer grease after a long shift, black and slick and bottomless if you stared too hard. I popped open the freezer lid. Cold air slammed into my face, cutting through the sick warmth of the kitchen. I grabbed the bag of waffle fries, the same ones I dumped in bins back when I did food prep during college. They were supposed to be dry and stiff, crinkle-cut and half-frosted with freezer burn. But when my hands dove into the bag, it didn't feel like frozen potatoes. The lumps squirmed under my fingers, soft and cold, like catching minnows in a bucket of ice. I nearly dropped the whole bag when something inside brushed my wrist, quick as a pulse. I forced myself to breathe through my nose. I pulled out 2 handfuls, dumped them into the fryer basket. The oil hissed to life before I even touched the handle. I dunked them once, watched bubbles boil up around them, counted in my head, 1, 2, 3, 10. I scooped them out, shook them off, dropped them back in again. Second fry. My knuckles hovered over the splatter of hot oil. I didn't dare flinch. I counted to 10 again, each second feeling longer than the last. The fries curled at the edges, pieces of frost hissing away in oily pops that hit my apron and arms. Behind me, the girl hadn't moved. I felt her stare slide across my shoulders like cold water dripping down my spine. I forced my hand to stay steady. 10. Done. I lifted the basket, dumped the fries into one of those red plastic boats that always felt sticky, no matter how many times we ran them through the dishwasher. I turned, set it on the counter in front of her. The fries steamed. The smell didn't remind me of potatoes. It reminded me of wet towels and raw meat left too long in the sun. She didn't touch them. Her mouth stretched into a grin that made my chest feel like it had forgotten how to hold my lungs in place. Her teeth didn't match her size. Too many, too long, like someone had stuck shark teeth into a doll's jaw. She took 1 step backward. Her feet left wet prints that didn't look like water. The basket of fries hovered behind her, bobbing gently like someone was carrying it for her. She kept walking backward until the bell above the door chimed again. She was gone. The door swung gently on its hinges, but never fully closed. I looked down at the fryer. Oil popped once, spit onto the tile at my feet. The freezer door still gaped open, frost swirling around the hinges. I closed it with my elbow, wiped my palms on my apron until they burned from the friction. 2 rules done. 5 to go. The paper in my pocket felt heavy enough to pull me to the floor. I pulled it out anyway. My eyes drifted down to the next line, the Sharpie smear just clear enough to read. 3. If a woman in a red coat demands a grilled chicken sandwich with extra skin, wrap it in foil, but hide it under the counter. If you hand it over, you'll feel her teeth next. The fryer behind me hissed again. The doorbell clanged like a fist hitting a bell at a carnival. I didn't even bother pretending this wasn't happening anymore. I just turned back to the counter and waited for the next thing I'd wish I'd never seen. I barely had time to breathe before she came in. The bell above the door didn't just chime this time. It slammed against the glass like something had thrown it from the outside. The air turned sharp in my nose, sour like burnt feathers and old grease. She didn't walk to the counter. She stormed. Her boots slapped the tile, leaving dark smears that faded almost as soon as they appeared. Her red coat clung to her shoulders, soaked through like she'd been caught in a storm no one else could see. Strands of black hair stuck to her forehead, dripping onto her collar like she'd just stepped out of a flooded basement. She slammed one hand on the counter. Her fingernails were chipped, but the tips looked too sharp, thin slivers of something like bone poking out under the chipped polish. Her eyes were locked on mine, unblinking. "Grilled," she hissed. Her voice was wet, like she'd swallowed a mouthful of fryer oil before speaking. "Extra skin." Every instinct I had told me to say we were closed, to say we were out of chicken, out of anything. But the rule burned behind my eyes like I'd written it myself. Wrap it in foil. Hide it under the counter. Don't hand it over. My throat clicked when I swallowed. I reached for the thawing stack of chicken breasts in the prep bin. They should have been stiff, still half frozen from the deep freeze, but when my fingers brushed the plastic wrap, the meat twitched like something alive underneath. I peeled back the cover, tried not to gag when a thin film of pink juice slid down the inside of the bin. I grabbed a breast and set it on the cutting board. The knife felt too small in my hand, the handle slick from old oil and sweat. I slid the blade under the skin. It didn't cut clean. It tugged like fabric, stretching instead of tearing. I pressed harder until the skin peeled away in my hand, warm and rubbery. Behind me, the fryer sizzled, filling the space with that smell that never really goes away. Burnt oil, cheap breading, old fear. I built the sandwich one-handed, fighting the urge to look up at her face. The bun stuck to my glove. The chicken twitched again when I pressed it down. I wrapped the whole thing in foil, tight enough to feel the shape of the meat through the layers. Her fingers drummed the counter. Each tap made a hollow sound that echoed in my skull, like a nail gun driving straight into my temples. I slipped the sandwich under the napkin bin, hiding it where no one would see it unless they knew to look. When I straightened up, she was leaning over the counter. Her breath smelled like burnt feathers and vinegar. Her lips curled back, showing teeth, too sharp, too long, thin like broken glass, packed tight behind her gums. I forced my voice through my clenched jaw. "Sorry, ma'am. Out of stock." She didn't move. Not for a heartbeat. Not for two. Then her grin cracked wider. The skin at the corners of her mouth split, leaking something dark onto her coat collar. She leaned closer, sniffed the air like she could still taste the sandwich under the counter. A hiss escaped her throat, more steam than sound. Then she turned on her heel, boots squealing across the tile. The door swung open for her before she even reached it. The air behind her smelled scorched, like someone had thrown a box of feathers into a bonfire and shut the lid. I didn't watch her go. I dropped to my knees and pressed my palms to the cold tile, counting my breaths until my chest stopped rattling. The napkin bin rattled once, just a soft reminder that the sandwich was still there, wrapped tight, hidden where her teeth couldn't reach me. When I finally stood up, I wiped my hands on my apron and pulled the rule sheet back out. My eyes landed on the next line, the words oily and smudged but still clear enough to read. 4. If twins come to the drive-thru in a car with no wheels, they will whisper, 6 nuggets. Only give them 5. Keep the 6th in your pocket until dawn. The headset by the register buzzed to life on its own, crackling with static that sounded like a dozen voices whispering at once. Outside, the drive-thru sign flickered, the yellow light humming like a fly trapped in a jar. I didn't bother pretending I had a choice anymore. I clipped the headset on and waited for the next voice I'd wish I'd never heard. The headset settled over my ears. Static popped and fizzed inside the earpiece, like someone whispering secrets into a tin can on the other side of the world. I leaned against the counter, the rules sheet tucked back in my pocket, but burned into my head now. 5 nuggets, not 6. The fryer behind me gurgled to life like it had read the line too. The drive-thru bell pinged once, sharp enough to cut through the static in my ear. The monitor flickered on, at first just a haze of snow, then shapes started pressing through the static. 2 pale faces leaned into the camera, noses almost touching the greasy lens. Twins. Boys. They looked like they'd been carved out of candle wax left too close to a space heater. Same cracked smiles, same milky eyes that rolled in opposite directions like marbles that wouldn't sit still. Behind them, their car hovered inches off the slick asphalt. No tires, no rims, just rusted wheel wells hanging empty, while the undercarriage flickered with sparks that didn't light up anything else around them. The lot beyond the headlights looked like an empty ocean. No street lamps, no painted lines, just dark that felt too thick to be night alone. They didn't move their lips, but the voice in my ear was clear enough to knot my stomach. 6 nuggets. Not a question, not a request, just a demand floating through the static. My eyes darted to the tray of nuggets under the warmer. I grabbed a box, my fingers leaving sweat marks on the cardboard. 5 nuggets. I counted twice, each one soft and damp in my glove. The 6th one was the smallest, pale with a pink spot that almost pulsed under the heat lamp. It looked raw around the edges, like it hadn't finished cooking no matter how long it sat there. I wrapped that 6th nugget in a napkin and slipped it into my apron pocket. It felt heavier than all 5 others combined. Warm, too warm, like holding a baby bird that didn't want to stay still. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, closed the box with 5 inside, and slid it through the drive-thru window. The glass hissed open by itself, cold air pushing through like someone had left a freezer door open in my ribs. The twins leaned closer, their foreheads bumping together on the greasy metal frame. They each grabbed a nugget from the box at the same time, jaws working in perfect mirror rhythm. No chewing. Just soft, wet bites that made my headset crackle with static louder than before. Their car didn't roll away. It drifted, floating backward, sparks flicking under the bare wheel wells. The lot swallowed them like a mouth closing slow over a piece of bread it didn't want to swallow yet. I pressed my palm against my apron pocket. The nugget pulsed once, pushing back like a tiny heartbeat against my fingers. I thought about tossing it in the fryer just to watch it shrivel up and stop moving. But the rule scratched at the inside of my skull. Keep the sixth in your pocket until dawn. The headset crackled again, this time with silence that felt thicker than static. I unclipped it, dropped it on the counter, wiped sweat from my forehead with the cleanest corner of my sleeve I could find. The rules sheet waited in my pocket, warm against my hip like it was alive too. I pulled it out, eyes landing on the next line, the Sharpie mark now smudged into the paper like an old bruise. 5. If a man with no face appears at the counter and says, "Chicken minis," give him honey instead and pray. My ears rang with leftover static. My pocket throbbed with the soft bump of the hidden nugget. The lights above the counter flickered once, twice, then steadied, humming like they were trying to remind me the night wasn't over yet. When I turned around, I almost screamed. He was already there, standing on the other side of the counter, suit neat, posture stiff, head blank as a dinner plate wiped clean. No eyes, no mouth. But I heard him anyway. "Chicken minis." He didn't move when he said it, or when whatever voice he used drifted out of nowhere and landed right inside my head. His suit looked too clean for this place. The cuffs pressed sharp, even though the sleeves ended just above wrists the same color as wet plaster. His collar was buttoned all the way up to where his chin should have been. Except there was nothing, just smooth skin. No hint of bone underneath, no curve of a jaw, nothing that said human except the fact that he was standing upright. My hand bumped the napkin dispenser as I backed up. It rattled against the counter, the sound sharp enough to make my ears ring in the silence. He didn't flinch. He didn't lean forward. He just stood there, blank face tilted slightly down at me, or through me. My mind grabbed at the rule like a lifeline. Honey. Give him honey. Pray. I forced my feet to shuffle sideways toward the condiment bins. My sneakers stuck to the floor with every step. Syrup, spilled soda, fryer oil that hadn't been mopped in years. I fumbled for the bin marked honey. The plastic lid squeaked when I flipped it up. Inside, a dozen or so packets sat in a clump, wrappers sticky with old leaks. I grabbed one, but my fingers were slick with sweat. It slipped, fell onto the counter, bounced off, hit the floor. The faceless man didn't react. His arms hung at his sides like he'd never learned how to use them. I grabbed another. This one stuck to my glove. I squeezed too hard. The foil packet burst, warm honey seeping down between my knuckles, dripping onto the floor in slow, golden ropes. I didn't bother cleaning it up. I held the torn packet out, the sticky mess dripping from my wrist to the countertop. He didn't lift his hands to take it. He just leaned forward a little, blank skin folding where a nose might have been if he'd been born right. Then the middle of his face opened. Not a mouth, more like a crack splitting soft clay. The skin peeled back, wet and pink underneath. No teeth, just a round, pulsing opening that made the honey packet in my hand feel suddenly clean by comparison. He bent lower, closer to my hand. A wet slurping started, like honey being sucked through a drain full of hair. His skin folded and pulsed around the torn packet until the last drop was gone, my wrist now clean but sticky with spit that didn't feel like spit at all. When the last sound of it faded, the slit in his face closed, skin sealing over like it had never been there. He straightened, lifted one hand, and bowed his head a fraction of an inch. Then he turned away. No steps, no shuffle, just a soft blur like a smudge on old glass. He faded into the wall by the bathroom sign, the last bit of his suit sleeve slipping through the plaster without leaving a mark. I stood there with my hand still outstretched, sticky and trembling. I grabbed a wad of napkins and wiped my palm until the paper turned to pulp. It didn't help. The smell of honey stuck in my nose, sweet and sickening. I pressed my other hand to my apron pocket. The sixth nugget pulsed once under my fingers, still warm, still alive in that small, awful way. The lights above the prep station flickered again, slower this time, like they were tired too. I pulled out the rules sheet with the clean corner of my sleeve, unfolded it one more time with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. 6. If someone slides a note under the back door that just says, "Milkshake," do not open the door. Pour a shake into the sink instead. Listen until the slurping stops. A soft scratching sound drifted down the hall just beyond the dry storage room. I knew where it was coming from before I turned to look. The back door. Hinges whining under something that wanted in but didn't knock. Not yet, anyway. I stuffed the ruined napkins in my pocket beside the twitching nugget, grabbed the shake machine handle, and told myself I still had enough strength to follow at least one more rule. The scratching behind the back door didn't stop. It dragged on in slow bursts, a soft, wet squeal of hinges grinding against metal like they were trying to breathe. I stood in front of the milkshake machine and pressed my palm flat against the cold steel casing. The old compressor inside rumbled awake, humming low and broken, like it hadn't been used in years, but somehow knew it was time. I heard the soft scrape again. Something thin, maybe a fingertip or a nail, pushing under the door just enough to slip a scrap of paper through the crack. The note fluttered across the greasy tile and stopped against my shoe. I didn't want to pick it up. I didn't want to bend down, put my face that close to the door where I could hear the breath on the other side. A thick, gurgling wheeze that never quite rose to a knock. But the rule said I had to see it. I had to know what it asked. I crouched and grabbed the edge of the paper. Grease soaked the corner, smudging the cheap ink until only one word stayed clear. Milkshake? A question like a grin that wouldn't close. I stood up too fast. The note still pinched between two shaking fingers. I dropped it on the prep table and turned back to the machine. My hands worked on their own. Grabbed a large paper cup, tore the plastic lid off the frozen mix container, punched the button that always stuck when I worked day shifts at places like this. The machine groaned to life, louder than I'd ever heard it. A wet churn, thick and heavy, the motor coughing up a lumpy swirl of pink that hit the bottom of the cup like raw cement. The smell that drifted out didn't remind me of milk or sugar or anything you'd sell for $3 and change. It smelled like sour meat and freezer burn, sweet only if you liked the taste of spoiled milk stuck under your tongue. I fought the urge to gag. The scratching behind the door turned sharp, faster now. A tap, tap, tap that kept perfect rhythm with the heartbeat pounding in my ears. I carried the cup to the sink by the fryer, the same sink I'd used for the tap water hours ago, or however long it had been. I couldn't trust the clock anymore. It kept blinking 3:33, frozen like the world couldn't push forward without dragging me with it. I flipped the faucet on, cold water blasting over my knuckles. I tipped the cup and watched the thick pink sludge spiral out, slow at first, then faster as the drain gulped it down. The scratching behind the door changed, a squeal, then a sigh. I held my breath. The milkshake kept flowing, a fat swirl that fought the drain, clinging to the metal edges like it wanted to stay behind. I shook the cup until the last stringy lump disappeared, washing down into pipes I didn't want to think about. Then the slurping started. Not in the sink, in the walls, under the floor, somewhere deep under the fryer pit where the smell of old oil couldn't quite cover the wet, thick sound of something drinking through the drains. I pressed my palm flat to the wall above the sink. I felt it vibrate under my fingers, like veins pulsing under skin that didn't belong to me. The slurping faded in slow gasps, each one quieter than the last, until only the hum of the ancient compressor stayed behind. Something knocked on the back door once. Just one tap, soft and polite, like someone saying thank you. I didn't answer. I didn't move until the hum of the shake machine sputtered out and the scratching was gone. I glanced down at my apron pocket. The sixth nugget pushed back against my thigh, a slow, tired pulse like a heart that wouldn't give up even if I begged it to. I pulled the rule sheet free, my fingers leaving a smear of half-dried honey on the edges. The last line stared back at me, bigger than it should have looked. 7. The last rule: if the cow ever asks for your order, don't answer. Never speak. Never look it in the eyes. Never tell it what you crave. I felt something shift in the ceiling tiles above the lobby. The painted cow mural above the booths creaked, the screws holding it in place popping loose one by one, each drop hitting the tile floor with a soft, wet slap. My throat closed around my breath. The fryer clicked behind me like a timer running out. I turned just in time to see the cartoon grin split wide. Hooves hitting the tile, black and slick, bones snapping under skin that stretched too thin to hide what came next. The mural shouldn't have been able to move. It was just paint on old drywall, smiling cows in cartoon hats telling kids to eat more chicken. But the moment the last screw popped loose, it didn't look like paint anymore. It peeled free like wet wallpaper, the edges curling and bubbling as if the colors had been waiting for skin. It hit the floor hooves first, slick, black, too long. The shape that rose up from the tiles looked almost like a cow if you squinted, if you ignored the fact that its legs bent the wrong way and its cartoon grin stretched wider than the whole mascot costume ever should. Its body was stretched thin, ribs showing under a patchwork of fake fur and something that glistened raw underneath. Its hooves slapped wet circles on the tile as it stepped forward, each step sounding like a mop hitting the floor too hard. Its nostrils dripped something thick and orange that hissed when it touched the cold linoleum. I pressed my back against the sink, hand clamped over the nugget still pulsing in my pocket like a heartbeat that wouldn't die. My other hand gripped the edge of the stainless steel basin so hard my fingers ached. The cow's eyes rolled under lids that looked like they'd been peeled from the same painted wall. White with black spots, flicking toward me like they were stuck on crooked. Its mouth opened and shut, rows of blunt teeth clicking in a slow rhythm that sounded too much like the cash register drawer behind the counter. When it spoke, it didn't sound like any voice I'd heard that night. It sounded like every voice layered together. Taryn's bored mumble, the twins' whispers, the girl's soft hiss, the scraping of the man with no face, all of them echoing through that wide, splitting grin. "What do you want?" it asked. The words hit my chest like fryer steam, hot, smothering. They filled my ears until I couldn't hear my own breath over the hum of the dead soda machine still dripping syrup behind me. I squeezed my eyes shut. The last rule beat in my head like the fryer's oil bubbling too high. Don't answer. Never speak. Never look it in the eyes. Never tell it what you crave. My tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth so hard it ached. I felt my lips twitch. My throat burned with a word I didn't want to say, a word that clawed at my teeth even though I knew it would kill me. The nugget in my pocket pulsed faster. Each beat sent a sharp heat up my leg, into my hip, into my gut. My stomach twisted. Hunger, exhaustion, raw fear that tasted like salt and old oil. The cow leaned closer, front hooves pinning the tile so hard the floor buckled under its weight. Its nostrils flared, dripping sauce that smoked when it touched the floor drain. Its eyes rolled back and settled on mine. I couldn't stop myself. I looked. "What do you want?" it asked again, softer this time, like a mother cooing to a crying child. The word fell out before I could stop it. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like every fry cook who'd ever closed up alone, every kid who ever begged for a paycheck that wouldn't bounce. I just want to go home." The cow's grin split wider. The skin at the corners of its mouth cracked, dripping something clear that hissed against my shoes. It leaned in so close I could feel its breath on my face, warm, sour, like sweet tea turned rancid under a heat lamp. "Home is here," it moaned. The sound rattled the fryer baskets behind me. Its hooves hit my wrists. Cold bone pressed my arms flat against the counter. The steel edge cut into my spine as it leaned in closer, its grin blotting out the ceiling lights. It didn't bite. It didn't need to. From somewhere inside its ribs, something clicked like knives hitting a cutting board. The first cleaver slid from its chest, a jagged blade made of pale bone that smelled like old fryer oil and bleach. The cow lifted it high and brought it down. I didn't feel teeth. I didn't feel claws. Just the clean, wet slice of something that knew exactly where to cut. Over and over, soft and careful, like prepping meat for tomorrow's special. My vision went fuzzy around the edges. The last thing I felt was the sixth nugget in my pocket going still, the heartbeat stopping all at once. The lobby lights flickered back on at 6:03 a.m. Taryn pushed open the back door, one hand wrapped around his ever-present cup of sweet tea. He sniffed the stale air, listened for the fryer hum, and checked the prep table. On the counter, neat rows of fresh, sealed patties waited in clear vacuum packs. No trace of the sticky floor. No sign of the cow, Just another spotless shift, ready for the breakfast rush. Taryn took a sip of tea, smiled at the humming soda machine that dripped syrup onto the clean tile, and flipped the sign on the door to open. Another loyal employee. Another breakfast special.